What's going on, guys? I figured I should do a video and explain what you should look for when you go and buy a used Honda Element. I'm sure you see them on Facebook Marketplace all day long. Some for $500, some for $6,000, some for $12,000, some for $18,000. But there's really just a few things that you need to know. The first thing, whenever I look at an Element and I see it on Marketplace, I go through the pictures and I make sure that there's no rust on the bottom of the door right here. Sometimes too, there won't be any rust on the door, but these drips, you'll see rust in the drips. That means the inside of the door is rusting. And what that means when the back doors are rusting is that the undercarriage is rusting. That's a telltale sign that there's rust underneath. So when I do see one that doesn't have rust in the back door, I will look at it. Once you decide you want to go look at the car, the first thing I do when I get there, before I even look inside, I come right to the back tire, go underneath, and look right here. You don't want this part of the frame to be rusty. And in this case, there's just a few little surface rust dots, but that's not bad. You can still see the paint is all there, and it's in very good shape. In comparison, I'll show you my rusty Element. Here's my rusty Element. You can see the rust on the back doors and the rust marks. We look underneath, and it's bad. There's the other trailing arm. After I look at the rear trailing arm mount, I come up to the front here and I check out the undercarriage here. Look at the rockers, make sure they're still intact. Everything looks good. Then I'll actually go inside and look at the car. Here are the rockers on the rusty car. The frame is all rotten. So once you open it up, the seller's usually going to want to show you how much room there is on the inside. You already know that. That's why you're looking at an Element. You're more concerned about the mechanical condition. The first thing before you start it, hopefully the car is pretty cool, you want to pop the hood. Now most of these Elements, the hood latch broke off because people try to pivot them up, but you're just supposed to pull straight out. You can usually grab that with your fingers and pull the hood open. Under the hood, you're going to look for a few things. First thing I'm noticing, there's no stickers on this hood, which means it's aftermarket, so it must have been in a front end collision. That's also why the front bumper is different. This is the aftermarket bumper. Those are original fenders. The aftermarket bumpers suck. They all turn gray and white like this. I'm not that concerned about it. You can see all the frame here is pretty good. Now, one thing to note here, some of the earlier Elements did not come with ABS. So if you live in an environment with snow and ice and you're concerned that you want ABS, make sure you check that out. First thing I'll do under the hood is I'll check the oil cap. Make sure there's no milky residue. Look in here, there's nothing out of the ordinary. Then you want to check the oil. Just make sure it's in there. It's good. You'll also want to look at the coolant. Now, you can see there is coolant in the overflow reservoir, which is good. If that was empty, you might be concerned. You also want to check the color of the coolant. This doesn't really matter right now, but you want to make sure it's not milky. This is not milky, it's green. It should be blue for Honda, so I am going to flush it out for blue coolant in the next video. Then you just want to take a look. Make sure there's no random oil dripping anywhere. The steering rack looks good. Now with the hood open, you'll want to start it up and come right back out front here. When you start it, listen for how it starts, because most of these old Elements, they're either on their new starter or they still have the original, which is getting very tired. It's no big deal, you can change it, but it's just gonna be another $300-400 if you gotta get a starter. This one starts up no problem. Once the engine's running, go ahead and turn on the air conditioning. You can hear the compressor kick on. That's spinning, and that's spinning. You want to make sure both the radiator fans are spinning. If they're not, there's a chance the engine was overheated at some point, and you don't want that. If one's spinning, it's usually okay, but if they both don't spin and the compressor kicks on, you're going to actually want to look at this real close and make sure there's no overheating problems. I'm noticing now the engine's very quiet. There's no exhaust leaks. It's hard to see underneath this one from the running boards, but it does have the aftermarket catalytic converter. The next thing you're going to want to do is take it for a drive. There is a check engine light on. This car is for P2646, the VTEC solenoid. I have a new pigtail, I just have to install it. I'm guessing that's the problem. There's also an airbag light. 3 out of my 4 Elements have airbag lights now. So we'll go for a quick little drive. You want to make sure the transmission shifts smoothly. Which it does. The brakes work good, which they do. They work all right. I'm gonna put new ones on anyways. Make sure there's no clunks in the steering. The steering wheel's crooked. I know I have to do some suspension work, so I'll need an alignment anyways. Once you're done with your test drive, now is when you want to check the check engine light code. Even if the check engine light was not on, still plug your scanner in, because the seller could have cleared the code just before you got there. And if you just start it up and plug it in, there could be no codes, but if you drive it, then there'll be a pending code, or even the check engine light might be on. Now you can take the scanner, with the car running of course, and we'll see what the codes say. Just the one code, like I said, 2646, 1 out of 1. It's a pretty common problem with the Elements. What happens with that P2646 code, water drips through here, lands on this pigtail connector for the VTEC solenoid and corrodes it. Now if you scan this check engine light and you're getting misfires or it's running really bad, be prepared that you could be putting like $2,000 into it for a new motor. These engines are pretty reliable, but I found that if you neglect looking at your cooling fans and you overheat the motor at a red light, or with your car stopped and idling and it overheats like in a drive-through, you blow a head gasket and then you might as well just put a new engine in it. Or if you don't adjust the valves every 110,000, you could burn a valve and have to replace the engine. Or sometimes these things burn oil, and if you neglect your oil changes, be prepared to put a motor in. So just use caution if you're getting a misfire code or anything that looks like it could be expensive. After the test drive, go around to each wheel and feel it. Make sure you don't have a stuck brake caliper. This one it's not hot because I just drove it around the block quick, but you can notice the significant amount of brake dust. This does have a sticky caliper. So it's hard to tell if the springs are broken while it's on the ground, but you can take a look, make sure there's nothing obviously broken. Take a look at these tie rod ends. They always need to be replaced because they're always original. You can see the grease on here. That's from inside the boot. The boot's ripped, so the grease escaped, and now there's gonna be some play, I guarantee it. Take a look at the tires. Notice the outside edge still has the blocks, but the inside edge doesn't. It's possible these were on the back at some point and now they're up here, but nevertheless, you're gonna need to do suspension work on any 20-year-old Element. Come around to the other front tire. This tire wears a little bit better. This worries me. I'm wondering if they broke a ball joint at some point. This tie rod end is the same. You can tell the boot's ripped and it's leaking grease, so I'm gonna have to replace that. The tires still have some tread, but they're dry rotting, so I'm gonna have to put 4 tires on it anyways. The back tires here are really bad. You can see the tread here is great, but you come to the inside and it's down to the cords, literally. That's from nobody installing adjustable upper control arms. If you take a look down the side too, you can notice how tipped in that tire is. Now that all the mechanical stuff is out of the way, you can go and take a look at the car. It has the classic ripped driver's seat, which I'm not that concerned about. All the doors open up nicely. The windows all work, the front windows work. Back seats are in pretty good shape. Take a look on the roof, make sure there's no big dents. The hatch opens, but it's got the classic worn out struts, so I know I'm gonna have to buy a set of these. But you can push it up the rest of the way. The tailgate opens and closes as it should. There is a spare tire, I checked before. Take another peek underneath. A little bit of rust on the bolts, but it's not bad compared. See my other Element? This whole thing is rusty. If you look at these panel gaps, this car they're a little large because this car wasn't an accident, but if they're like really off and the car seems fishy, which I've seen a lot, you can tell it was completely smashed in and somebody just tried to piece it together and sell it, I would pass, honestly. Check underneath for oil leaks. And then once you realize it's a good car, you can finally negotiate your price based on what you think it needs. You can kind of tell the seller, hey look, it needs 4 tires, it needs a brake caliper, you're probably gonna have to do the rotors while you're at it because that caliper was stuck. It needs a front bumper, it needs a driver's seat cushion, it needs the VTEC solenoid, and you can give him an offer that he can't refuse. If you're a real Element enthusiast, you'll notice the accessories, like these OEM fog lights, which are worth like $200 for a quick sale, $500 if you're greedy. These running boards, which are worth about $250. Roof rack, which is worth about $1,000. This metallic dash trim, I've never seen a set sell before. I'm guessing they're worth about $250. Center console armrest, they're worth like $250 to $400 depending on condition. And this tailgate spoiler, which is worth between $350 and $500. This one's probably worth $350 because the clear coat's fading. But this car's for my sister, so I'm just gonna leave the stuff on and let her enjoy it. Overall, that's what I look at when I buy an Element. I had to go 6.5 or 7 hours away to get it in New Jersey. And I got a car trailer to bring it home. There's a video in my channel, I think it'll be the one right before this, showing that trip. Oh, and always make sure you run a Carfax report. If you don't know anybody that works at a car dealership, you might have to buy one, but it's worth it because it's very easy to swap the cluster on these. You can do it in less than 5 minutes and basically put whatever mileage you want on the dashboard. I ran the Carfax on this one and it came back as clean and The mileage adds up every year. There's no sudden rollbacks. Another thing when you're looking at the Element, check and make sure there's both keys. This car only came with one key, no remotes. So I have to make another key just so there's a spare and get some remotes programmed up. Also check the title, make sure there's no liens on it. If there are, make sure there's a lien release letter from the bank. Make sure it's not a salvage title or a rebuilt. Rebuilt is all right, but you don't want to deal with a salvage title. Thank you for watching.